Hello everyone, welcome to today's Vitocrossal 300 CU3A Wiring and Control Interface Basic Programming webinar. My name is Miranda Getling and I'm the Academy Manager here at Viessmann. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you for attending today. We appreciate you taking the time to attend this webinar despite what we're all going through. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy during this time. Today, your webinar instructor will be Jay Sheldon. Jay has been with Viessmann for the last 5 years. The first 3 years, he was a member of the Technical Service Department before moving into his current role as the Academy Training Instructor. Jay has a master license, has been in the heating and cooling industry for the past 30 years, including holding job titles as General Manager, Service Manager, and owner of his own company for 14 years. Jay is a United States Army vet and loves to spend time with his wife, 2 children, and 2 grandsons. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Everyone will stay muted throughout the webinar. However, you do have the ability to ask any questions you have throughout the entire webinar through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. On the left side, you will see the desktop laptop version, and on the right is the mobile device version. Jay will be stopping about halfway through the presentations and at the end to answer any questions submitted, so feel free to pop them in there at any time. We will be recording this webinar, and within 2 weeks or so, the video will be posted on the video library, which is located on the same website you went to register for this webinar, the Viessmann Academy website. Once you are in that video library, you will have to click the recorded webinars section and then the Discover More button 2 times for all of the videos to populate. This is where this recording will be posted. Like I said, this will be up within the next 2 weeks, so at that time, you will be able to go back and rewatch this webinar at any time. With that being said, let's begin. Here is Jay Sheldon.
Thanks, Miranda. But welcome everybody, and thanks for joining me for this webinar. Today's webinar is going to be on the Vitocrossal CU3A. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out this from our Academy website where everybody joined this morning, or whenever you joined, I'm sorry. We have other things that we offer here as well, but what I wanted just to show you is I always find this a very valuable information. So when you go up to this menu up here, go into that Pro Resources, as well as those videos that you saw on you can see on the website. We also have other videos on that our Academy website. But on this page here, this is for us contractors. So for contractors, and these classes are designed for contractors only or service technicians in the business, not for non-licensed contractors. But I always like to show this up because all our current manuals, if you want to get those manuals, historic manuals. So when I was in tech support, I did a lot of the historical product in there because being the old guy that I am, I installed all the old product that they had. Product warranties, white pages. But this other thing is really neat here. Fault code checker. Any faults that you get on our boiler, you come to this fault code checker. You click OK on it. It will ask you if you're a contractor or if you're not a contractor. Click that you are a contractor. Then it will bring you right to the fault code checker. Once you get to the fault code checker, any boiler that we have out there, you put that code, fault code that you get in there. It will tell you what the fault is, how to fix the fault, and do you want to see the manual. So that's this is a really neat site for everybody if you do a lot of work with our boilers, as well as we offer a lot of different classes at our Academy in Warwick. And hopefully when this is all said and done, we have more people coming to the Academy. They're always a full class because it's all hands-on. Most of it's all hands-on. And that's the way I like to learn and as teach as well. I think once you see it, taste it, and smell it, it's a lot better to understand it. Excuse me. Technical bulletins, parts, Vito specs, any engineering specifications like parts you may need for the installation, low loss header sizes, stuff like that. So today we're going to be starting off with the wiring of the boiler. And I like to start with the wiring because it will kind of lead into the programming of the boiler, because with the startup wizard, it asks you to pick your pump placements. And so if you can see where your pumps are going to go to once you pick them, then you know how to wire them. All right. Again, thanks everybody for coming, and we're going to get started now, and hopefully I can keep you awake for the next hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. So in this class today, some of our objectives to kind of throw out at you is line voltage, low voltage, and our sensor connections. You're going to find with all our boilers, our line voltage, our low voltage numbers are all the same across the board, from our Vitocrossal 100 to our CA3 commercial boiler, 6 million BTU boiler. The sensor, our numbers are the same. So once you learn our sensors, our numbers for your pump outputs, they're all going to be the same. So we're going to cover that today, as well as going over the boiler, which kind of sets us apart from other controls, and how the ease of navigation, as well as doing different temperatures right out of the boiler. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the control once we learn what they can do. With this boiler here, it's not a flow switch activated boiler. This is a high mass boiler. So if you've installed it already, you'll know that it is a high mass compared to our 200 or our 100, where you have to pipe those two boilers, primary, secondary. This boiler here, you can pipe right back into your old piping if you wanted to. It's just exactly like the old piping that you would do on the older ways. I normally always do pump away on my boilers. And I find that on this boiler here, I actually put my expansion tank on where the boiler drain goes. Making your expansion tank last is all about location. I always brag about my expansion tank, but it's 22 years old. So where you install them. So let's get started on wiring this boiler. First, we have to take the cover off the boiler, and on the very top, you're gonna find that there is a one screw, and that screws right into the very top here. Once you unscrew that screw, you take it out, and then you'll lift the jacket cover off the pins that are on the bottom there. And you'll realize what quality this boiler is just by taking the cover off the boiler. To me, this is the Cadillac of residential boilers here. I tend to really like this one. I've already put quite a few of them in, and I like the ease of installation on these boilers, as well as high mass. Once we get the cover off, there's your wiring at the bottom of the boiler there. So your knockouts are at the very bottom. So you bring your wires through the back notches here, and then bring them inside to the boiler. And what I found some guys do is, this boiler does get shipped with a pallet to help you get it down stairways and things to that nature. Once you take that pallet off the back of the boiler, there's actually screws here and up top. And some guys will actually put threaded rod channel in there. And then it gives you something to mount your piping to, or your wiring to. Just a little helpful tool. We have it at our academy as well. And he actually hung all this flue pipe off the bracket, so it's neat to do. It's just makes it neater. So looking here at the plugs on the bottom of the boiler here are your where all your line voltage is going to go to the right hand side here. And as I start to talk, you're going to find that all our boiler numbers are the same. So since I've been putting these boilers in for over 30 years, that 40 plug has always been the incoming power to the boiler. So this on the right-hand side is called your power pump module. So most of your pump outputs are going to be on the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side are going to be dry contacts or the pump outputs. And once we start to go through them, I'll show you which pumps they normally have you pick throughout the startup visit. We have two fuses here, one that's going up to the upper control, and then the other one that's powering this control over here. This what we're looking at, the power pump module. So most of your line voltage is going to come in here. And I always recommend that you do put some type of serviceman switch on the outside to kill power to the boiler, so it kills the power down here to the power pump module. Excuse me. Because if you shut the power switch on top of the boiler, it doesn't kill the power coming down here. If you needed a boiler pump, you could do it. You can do primary, secondary with this boiler, but you don't have to. So that 20 pump could be one of your system pumps. Your 21 pump output there is always designated as your DHW, but you can also change that to, if you're not doing DHW, to be either a recirculation pump or a heating pump as well, depending on what you're doing. 2820 is normally designated for a recirculation for your domestic. So if you're doing recirculation on your hot water side, that's where you'll locate this. And you'll see when we get into program that we also have a recirculation time program as well as time programs for domestic. But in that startup wizard, this is one of the things that is going to have you pick for one of your pump outputs. So that 2820 is going to be one of your pump outputs that is going to have you pick in the startup wizard. So just to show you, that's where you're going to wire that pump, depending on if you're using it on ZC1, ZC2, or ZC3, whatever one you're setting up. And you'll see that when we go into programming, that's where you're going to wire that 2820 that they have you pick in that startup wizard. Next, with this boiler here, it doesn't have flow switch. It's not a flow required boiler. So it does come with a low water cutoff, and then they show you two different places with this boiler where to wire your low water cutoff. Normally in the manual, it shows you this one here at the multi-plug, and the multi-plug, what you would do is you would, it will come up when we get more into wiring. But your L is going to power one side of your low water cutoff and then come back and back down to 1. As you can see, there's actually a jumper here on that multi-plug. If you took that jumper out, it would stop the connection of the boiler continuation. So that's why you would put your low water cutoff here. Excuse me, some guys like to put it on the 40 plug, which is your incoming power. Either way, you can do. Multi-plug will keep your pumps running, but your boiler burner will not fire. So your system pumps would stay running. And if they stay running, less chance if the boiler's down on low water for things to freeze up. On the other side is your EA1 module. So on this side here, you see there's a fuse for this EA1 module on the, for your communication side. The 40 plug is actually coming over from the other side of the other module, your power pump module, I'm sorry. And then here is your 157. So this 157, you're going to find that that's going to be one of your pump outputs that they have you pick as well. So see that 157 can be an alarm or a pump output. If you do pick that 157 on your ZC1, ZC2, or ZC3, you do have to power that, and we'll be showing you that coming up in wiring, but you're going to take power from this 40A over to this 157 to power that relay. So when it closes, it powers your circulator. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we can actually take a 0 to 10 input, meaning in Europe, they do a lot of 0 to 10 thermostats, Canada as well. So we can take a 0 to 10 input, or if you're doing Tecmo control with snow melt or something, then you want to operate the boiler that way, you can do it with that. All your end switches, your zone or thermostats are going to land over here. So these were the DE1, DE2 that I was talking about, DE3. So when you land your end switch or your thermostat, that's going to call one of your pumps on. So that's where when you go through the startup wizard, this is where you're going to land your thermostat as well as your pump here, as well as the 2820 or your 20. Taking the top of the cover, there's 2 nuts on the very top. Actually, there's 2 screws on the very top cover. On the back side, you take those 2, that jacket slides off, and then to get to the top control, there's 2 nuts. Take the 2 nuts off, lift the jacket off, and then you're looking at this side here. So now we're looking down at inside the CU3A control. If you look here on the left-hand side, this boiler does come with lawn control. So lawn is for cascading boilers. So this boiler can cascade up to 8. So that means you can have 8 of these boilers cascading and communicating with the MW2C Cascade Control. It does come with it. The lawn cable comes with it as well. So there's the start of your lawn communication. So looking at that top control and what we're looking at, that orange plug where you're going to put our #1 sensor, which is our outdoor sensor on all our boilers. So when you hear our #1 sensor, it's our outdoor temperature sensor. That's going to get wired into this X3 orange plug on the left-hand side when you're looking down from the front of the control on 1 and 2. So your outdoor sensor has to be connected to this boiler, and it's going to go to 1 and 2. As you can see to the left-hand side there, we have a 0 to 10 output as well. And I've been, it hasn't been doing a lot here in the US, so I've been messing around with it, and I actually have some pumps on this boiler at the shop that takes a 0 to 10 pump output, which I find pretty neat because now we can modulate the pumps as well as the temperature of the boiler. And that's how we're really gonna get this boiler to condense as well. So neat things on this boiler here. Over here on the left, right-hand side, you see here, there's a fuse for this control. So if you let the smoke out of the box, there's actually a spare fuse in the middle. The very bottom is the plug, the fuse for the control, but in the middle is a spare fuse. That's a 6.3 fuse. If the fuse blows down below, this fuse will work. These are all your pump connections that go down to the below. So these are things that only doing testing on. The other thing that you would plug into that orange X3 plug is, if you were using it, would be a low loss header sensor if you wanted to do primary, secondary. But on 1 and 2, that terminal is your outdoor temperature. We want to see that on your northwest side of your building, which is normally your coldest side of your building. And if you're running it along high voltage wires, you want to have shielded cable going to it. I think the maximum distance on this is 125 feet for your outdoor wiring. The neat thing is the next generation boilers are going to be wireless. I've been looking for this for years and years, that save a lot of time on your installation and put that outdoor sensor wireless. Excuse me. Our #5 sensor is also a DHW sensor. So when you hear, I'm trying to just let you know coinciding numbers. When you learn our numbering system, the same for all our boilers, the 100, 200, 300, CM2, all have a #5 sensor. And that's your domestic sensor. So that would go into your domestic well. On top of the boiler, when you're looking down here, the #5 sensor is actually not inside this control, it's sitting outside, so you only have to take the very top control off. Just remember, when you plug in our sensors, it's auto-recognized. So as soon as you plug in that #5 sensor, it now knows it has domestic connected to the boiler. So that's gonna activate that 21 plug for your pump. So looking at down at the top of the control, now you can see that #5 is just sitting right on the outside of the wire. It's kind of twirled together with a little extra wire on there. So that #5 sensor that we give you, the domestic sensor, plugs right into that. And so these are the female sides, and then the male sides plug into the other sides of this. And that's your connections. It now knows it has domestic. If you don't plug those in, it's not going to look for domestic. It's not going to ask you to make domestic temperature changes on the startup wizard, as you'll see when we get into programming. Here's a nice little electrical connection just to show you different connections of where the pumps may be or what they might be doing. So just a neat little, and these are just taken right out of the manual, and we just add color to them. So now you can see the 2820 can either be used for a recirculation on your domestic, or it can be a system pump. Your #5 sensor is going to go into your indirect tank. On the smaller ones, there's actually a dip tube inside that goes down on the 42-gallon tanks. As well as your 21 pump down at the bottom there is for your domestic. So just remember, when you plug in that #5 sensor, it now knows that it has domestic tied into the boiler. And lastly, that 157 on the far right. And remember, that's a plug that we're going to wire, and that's coming up in the presentation. Looking at our numbering system in a kind of a nutshell here. our pump outputs, our fan motors, our gas valve numbers, all our things are numbered, and they're key to what they can't go into the same, like our one plug can't go into the other. So there's no way, once you take your burner apart, or if you take something apart, you're not like my day, I used to have to write down on a piece of paper, okay, red goes here, blue goes here. Or nowadays you can take a picture, but you can't mess these up. They only go into one spot. That's a nice thing about them. So looking at the, in the red square boxes here are pretty much our line voltage. In blue are low voltage and sensors. And remember, all our sensors are auto-recognized, as well as our mixing valves, as well as if you did a Vito control with this, which would be an upstairs room temperature sensor. And the neat thing with this boiler is you no longer need that Vito control, because you can do all the temperature changes right from your phone. And that app comes with this phone. It comes with the Wi-Fi device as well. On the 200, that's an option, but on the 300, it does come with this boiler. Your DE contacts are dry contacts, so notice it must be a dry contact sending over here to it. It must be a dry contact coming to it. So if you wanted to run your system with our boiler, you would just either run your two thermostats right to the boiler, to those DE1, DE2, or DE3s, and then that would control the pumps. And then you would just run your pump going over to your domestic to your 21 spot. So it would look like that. So these are just representing thermostats, just showing you these two thermostats running into the the box at the bottom of the boiler here to your DE1 and the DE2, but they're now called CC1, CC2. Prior to this model here, they had HC1, HC2, and you'll see when we get into coding that it's a little different. The startup does everything for you right from the initial startup. But if you want to go into coding and make changes to the pump output to make it a different operation, you can go into coding and change that as well. So if you wanted to change that 2820 pump output, you would go to this address 53 in coding level 2, and then change it to what you were looking to do with that pump. So you can do different things with our pump outputs. That's what I'm just showing you here. But in the startup wizard, pump 2820, they're going to have you pick that as a system pump, as well as the 157. So now you can see in the wiring diagram, and this is right out of the manual, it's just added color. And even if you go to the wiring schematic at the end of the service manual, they show this right at the very bottom. So now you're going to take power from that L, from that 40A plug. There's normally nothing on it. And you're just going to bring a wire and bring it over to your P. That's now powering that relay. Once that relay gets energized from the call, whatever you have it on, DE1, DE2, which are, over here. Your thermostat calls, it now energizes this relay here. Now you send the power over to your pump. So that is a powered pump that you have to power. So normally when you're in our class, this is one of the exercises you normally do. You get there, there's a bunch of wires just sitting in the box down here. And then you're going to trace them out, and then you're going to wire them in. So it's just a neat, quick little exercise just to show you how things work and just to get you familiar with wiring and the wiring numbers on our system. So after you labeled what you did, now you wired them in. So now you can see over here, prior picture, we had the jumper in that multi-plug, and then you guys take out the multi-plug, that jumper, and now wire in your low water cutoff, as well as your system pump was the 2820 for this boiler. We're using it as a one-zone boiler. You can do it this way. Here, you can have multiple zones. If you want to add more zones to this boiler, we do sell what they call is an AM1 module. So after 3, we're going to have to go over to the AM1 module. And notice here, anything we're bringing over to our boiler must be a dry contact. you have anything power stealing, you're gonna have to put some type of relay, isolation relay, like a ribby relay or anything like that. If you want to add more pumps to the boiler, you can add our AM1 relay extension module to your kit, and then add more pumps to the boiler and more things. Remember auto recognition with this boiler. This is looking inside that box there. So remember our 145 communication. Anytime you plug anything into that on our boiler, it now knows we have that. So on this AM1 module, here's your 145 communication over here. So once you wire in your T-stat wire to that plug, you'll send it over to the boiler to the 145 communication. It now knows it has a mixing valve. And now you'll see in your programming, you have an AM1 module. So it makes it pretty easy and simple for programming. So you can set up another heating curve for this or make another fixed set point for these as well. So you can do a lot of different things with these controls on these boilers. Remember, I get all these questions, I answer them during the class. If I don't get to them during the class, if there's a lot of them, I answer them and you all get them back. I don't see who sends them to me, so I really don't know who sends them. So please ask your questions, get your answers.
All right, looks like we do not have any questions yet.
All right, I know it's afternoon after lunch. I know I had to kind of wake up before I got on today because I just ate lunch and all my energy is going to my stomach here, which seems to get larger here lately. So continuing on, but hey, if you think of questions, please ask them, get your answers. So looking at it this way, now you can actually do it this way, and you can have multiples of these as well. So now we can hook up somebody's zone control, bring in your 4 thermostats to that zone control, put your 4 pumps to your zone control, and then just send your TT or XX over to the boiler to either DE1, DE2, or DE3. Sorry. And then the neat thing is, okay, if I want to run just a fixed set point for these 4 zones here, or do weather compensation for just these 4 zones, send that over to DE1 and then set a fixed set point for that. That's all these are going to run up to. If I have another bank of zone valves or radiant in there, that's going to go over to DE2 or DE3, and then I can do a different temperature there, as well as our outdoor reset. So fixed set point or weather compensation. And I recommend using weather compensation because that's really what's driving our industry in this area over here. And where I'm from, Massachusetts and Rhode Island offer a rebate to install these high efficiency boilers. But they're looking to see that you're making sure that you're using your outdoor weather compensation, because this is what's going to modulate the boiler up and down to make it more efficient. This picture here happens to be zone valves, so you can do it either way. So your zone valves are down here. They would all get wired to your zone control, excuse me, as well as all your thermostats would now go into this box. And now same thing, you're going to send your end switch over to the boiler. Fixed set point, if you want to do it that way, or weather compensation. Or you could have this plus this, and each one has its own fixed set point or its own weather compensation. So now you can see that you can actually do 3 different temperatures out of the boiler. You're going to have 2 mixed temps. 1 high temp in this display here. So you can see ZC1, we're running up to 190 degrees. ZZ2, that one's only going to run, maintain around 140. And ZC3, that's going to maintain about 110. Without mixing valves, we have, like the AM1 module, it has its own device, its own box. And those boxes just plug in the wall, just like the AM1 module. So you just plug these in the wall. Your pump now goes to this box. The sensor that goes on this outlets of your going out to your system now goes over to this box. And then the same thing, if you had two like this, you could daisy change from 145 to 145 and out of this 145 over to the 145 down at the bottom of the control there. It will now know that it has two mixing valves tied into the boiler, and that would be HC2 and HC3. So you would adjust your heating curves accordingly for each HC2 or HC3. Here's what our mixing valves look like. I like our mixing valves. I've had very good luck with our mixing valves. Viessmann makes a very good quality mixing valve, or they sell a very good mixing valve. I have mine in my house 22 years. I've installed quite a few different types of mixing valves, and these tend to hold up for a longevity. That on the right-hand side is the mixing control box where your pump's gonna go, where your communication wire is gonna go, as well as your sensor. So at the far right there, there's your strap-on pipe sensor. That's going to keep modulating that zone valve left and right and keep mixing to make sure it's getting the proper temperatures to match your heat load in your house according to your heating curves. So looking inside them, it's powered open, powered closed, mixing valve. So if you have them backwards, you're just going to switch the wires. If it opens the opposite way, and you can do that in the actuator test. So when we go into programming, just remember you can, if you do have a mixing valve tied to your boiler, you can go into the actuator test, click on the one that you want to click on, and then open and close it, make sure it's going the right direction, or even to see if it's working. So there's a lot of functions in the things, but it's a lot to learn, but keep coming to training, and you will become RV pros. Kind of seeing what they look like on the right-hand side, our mixing valve, they tie in, and it communicates back to the boiler, our temperature sensor, our pump, and our mixing valve all get tied in here, and then this just gets plugged into a plug outlet. The strap-on pipe connection, I actually got calls on this before, there's actually a worm gear strap-on inside the cover, so you have to take the cover off, and then you'll find that strap right here. You wrap it around the pipe, it comes back, and then there's a little tip sticking up here, and you put it back on there and tighten the screw, and it tightens it right onto the pipe. I always usually put heat paste on mine, some type of heat paste for a good solid heat transfer. Looking inside the box, your plug outputs and all of that. So now you can see on the far left here, your 145 communication. Your number 2 is going to be that pipe connection on the outlet. You can put a return temperature sensor on this control, because if you want to do boiler protection on a cast iron boiler, you can use this 4-way mixing valve that we have for doing boiler protection on the back of the boiler, so you don't shock the boiler. The rest of your pump outputs, and then your power output. Remember, your power coming in is always going to be a 40 plug. This does have a plug that plugs into the wall. So if that plug gets tied in there, if you want to tie it in, you can take the plug out and then hardwire to it as well. So you would just take your plug off and hardwire it to your junction boxes, or your electrician does that. So now you can see on the right-hand side how it gets wired in. All your pumps are in. This is your mixing valve, open and close. Pump output, your power plug. That sensor, your pipe strap-on sensor, and then your 145 communication is just the basic thermostat wire. That runs over. Remember, the bottom of the CA3 on the AM1 module. On the left-hand side is your 145 communication. And remember, once you plug that in, that 145 communication, it now knows it has a mixing valve tied to it. So now you can see there's one here, your sensors on the coming out of the mixing module. And then your you have two connections inside that mixing valve box. So one, if you're just doing one mixing valve, it's going to go over and just tie into there. If you're doing two mixing valves or three mixing valves, I think it's up to four, and then you can go into a box that holds most of them. They sell a separate box. But now you can see all they're doing is daisy chaining from one mixing valve to the next, out of this one into that 145. It will now know it has two mixing valves connected. So you're going to set a heating curve for this one here, heating curve for this one, a room temperature set point, and a room temperature set point. HC2 and HC3, when you're looking at those are more or less constant circulation type of things there. Inside that mixing control is a mixing valve. When you're adding more, you have to make sure you're changing that rotary dial so it coincides into what position and on what setup you're doing, and going up to multiples of them. This boiler does require a low water cutoff, and normally I install mine up here with a 4-way T because normally I put mine on my what they call the safety header. There's another pipe that's right above your supply going out of the boiler, and that's designed perfectly to scoop out all the air. So you really don't need any air elimination with this boiler. It's designed to scoop out all the air. And we give you the high vent. So normally, so you can see the gauge, I put the 4-way T so you can see the gauge. My low water's in the back. I put a T coming out for your relief valve, as well as your gauge. So showing you on that multi-plug how to wire that multi-plug. It goes down to that multi-plug. So now you can see you're going to go up to your low water cutoff and power it and come back down to just to break that circuit. Whoop, sorry. Kind of a tough picture to see on this one here, but it is in the manual, and depending on whose low water cutoff you're using. So you can either do it on your multi-plug, or remember our 40 plug is our incoming power. If you want to break your incoming power, I know some inspectors want to see it that way. You can do it either way. With your multi-plug, your pumps to your system will stay running, but your burner won't fire. When you kill the power to the 40 plug, nothing's going to run. Different things that you can send 0 to 10 to the boiler with. BMS. Maybe a Tecma control for snow melt, or somebody's mixing valve that takes a 0 to 10 or does a 0 to 10 input. How the 0 to 10 works for each volt you're giving it, it gives it more temperature. So you can see here, this is out of the chart as well. And just remember that you can see a voltage as you give it 1 volt, 2 volt on the bottom, and then what temperatures are on the left-hand side. Just follow whatever you're doing, Celsius or Fahrenheit. And then if you want to check it, sometimes I used to just have somebody take a 9-volt battery, hook it up there and see if it operates. You're just checking it quick. It will run up to those higher temperatures. So just be aware of that as well. And it is polarity sensitive, so positive to positive, negative to negative on this one here. As well as your incoming power, where you're plugging these things in, make sure those polarities are correct too, because they can send you for a loop. And just make sure you check the polarity, that's all. Looking at the sensors on our boiler, number 3A and 3B is a dual sensor into one cap. So there's actually 2 sensors inside the cap that you're going to see right in the front, right above the boiler, and then you can see now there's a number. So to test these, you would just make sure you do the coincide numbers that they show you here, and to do ohms test on them. All the ohms charts are in the manual as well. And as you can see, 3.1 is a 10K, 3.2 is a 20K. So the 3A is your fixed high limit. Your operating high limit. So that's adjustable for from 68 to 194. And then 3B is your fixed high limit. So if you get up above that 210, we're going to go off on fault. The fluid temperature sensor is located at the very bottom of the boiler. That's also a 10K resistor, NTC. You'll see that all our resistors are NTC and not PTC. So there's differences between resistors. But I always like to point out, it will go off at around 230, but anytime our flue gas temperature is typically 4 to 27 degrees higher than our retained boiler water temperature. So a nice little picture of a installation here. I always welcome guys to send in their pictures, and I display them because they are works of art. They are quality looking jobs, you know. I don't know how many times you bring down your customer, your friends and everything to show them your boiler like you do your car, but I'm that kind of geek. Come and take a look at these boiler jobs because they are works of art. Here's another one here. So now you can see all the different operations of all the different types of systems on this one here. We have our boiler. We have 2 zone controls, maybe doing 2 different temperatures. We have our mixing valve over here doing our mixing for our radiant. Have our domestic tank over here as well. Just another nice looking job. Not the same people. I get pictures from all over the US. So I just like to display them. So new pictures are always welcome. It's just showing you doing multiple boilers that are running together. And here's our Cascade Control, and that's the MW2C control, which I now have these boilers set up to do cascading in the class. So when you come to our cascading class, I have these all now set up with the MW2C, and you plug the wires in, and then I get little cheat sheets that you can cheat on. So in this part of the webinar, I did go over your low, your high voltage, your automatic recognized sensors, where they go, their numbering. It's a lot to take in, but the numbering's good to learn because they're the same for all our boilers. There are a lot of different things I showed you on the control that separate us from others. There's a lot of neat things you'll see. It does even more when we get into the control itself. And then 2 methods of wiring in your low water cutoff. So any questions on the wiring, please make sure you ask any questions. As you can see, it's not very complicated to wire this boiler here. Not a lot to do on it, really. It's nice and easy. Everything's wired right from the front. The ones I've installed have gone really quick. As far as the venting, polypropylene I do on the venting. I have vented these up through these with hard polypropylene as well. Fresh air always has to be PVC, by the way. Yeah. That's how we have installation classes as well.
It looks like we do have one question. Can you explain how the number 52 plug can be rotated to get the mixing valve to open in the correct position?
Yeah, when we come up in program, I actually show you how to do that. So we can open and close it through the actuator test. And that's all through the coding, not coding, but activating it through the control on the boiler. And that's coming up next.
All right, looks like that is the only question on the wiring section.
All right, let's go. All right, so we're going to go over the Vitocrossal 300 control. What the interface is going to do, the buttons, what they mean, the symbols, what they mean. I'm going to go over why it's important to put the correct time and date on this control. It is very helpful because you're going to see that it does a lot of different time things. go over a couple of different choices on when you are utilizing the startup with it, what temperatures are there. You can do either fixed set point or weather compensation. And we'll go over some heating curves, how to adjust them for different emitters. So looking at the control here, when these symbols come up, sometimes it can be confusing, but this is prior to the startup wizard here. So on the right-hand side is prior to the startup wizard coming. So this is something that we've always had on our controls. This represents a house, and this is what's going on in the house. So if you were doing HC circuits, that's more of a constant circulation. As well as on the right-hand side, this is the newer style of the startup wizard. So now you can see over here, it's a ZC functionality. Over here, we're doing HC functionality. I'll kind of try to describe that as we go through the presentation here. Just to go over the control is a Vitocrossal 200 kW 6P control. Once you start to learn our numbers, they're all fairly similar. This is no different really than the Vitocrossal control on the 200. When you fold down that front cover where that Viessmann is here, this is where you're going to find your on and off button, as well as your reset button here. And then that V to the left-hand side, that's where you're going to plug that V that comes with this boiler for your Wi-Fi for the homeowner. The red light and the green light means green light's good, red light you have a fault. If you do put that V inside here, it plugs right into the V itself. You'll find that the plug-in looks just like a V on one side, and then it's a black square looking at the outside. But that's right up here. So you lift up the cover, and now you can see here's your on and off button, your reset button, as well as your Optolinks for your V. I always like to explain when you have that cover off and you're putting that V in, you do have to pull, there's a little piece of plastic with two little pins on it that kind of just the plastic goes over your two little dots where those lights are, just so it reflects the lights up when you have the cover closed. That is just a little clip-on piece of plastic. You unclip that. So if you are using the V, so you can cover the close the cover. Because right in here, there's actually a little square part where your USB goes in through here, and comes out the back of the boiler, and then wherever you got that Wi-Fi device that comes with it, then you plug it right into that Vito Connect. I'm sorry. Looking at the navigation buttons on the boiler itself, starting with the very bottom, our menu key. That's where you're going to get to most of your navigation. Your question mark. That's if you're looking at something in that navigation that you don't understand. You press that, it'll kind of give you a brief explanation of what you're looking at. Anytime times you make any type of changes, the domestic or temperature-wise, you make sure you hit OK to acknowledge it. Any programming changes, any coding changes, have to hit OK to acknowledge it so it will save it. If not, you're going back and doing it again. Navigation keys, those are your up, down, left, right arrows, and then return to the previous screen is that the very one on the top, which was always a hard one to for me to explain on the phone. I always explained it as a U going to the left. When you do hit that menu button at the very bottom, this sub-menu here will come up, and then as you hit each one, the different sub-menus will come up for doing different things. So let's start with the very bottom, your settings. So once you see when we get to the startup wizard and how you set that up, if you do have to go back and reset your time and date, this is where you would go in. So you would hit that three buttons at the bottom, scroll down till settings, hit OK on settings. Then this pops up here. Click OK on your time and date, reset your time and date if you want to. Sometimes, a lot of times I used to put my language or somebody else's language that they spoke in there, and that way they could follow along with me in their language on the boiler itself. And it did a lot of different languages. Contrast, brightness, that's where you're going to adjust that for your screen itself. Temperature of unit, say I want to go back to Celsius. that's where you would go. I just like saying that because for 30 years I've been taking it out of Celsius and putting it in Fahrenheit. This boiler actually comes in Fahrenheit now. If you want to name your heating circuits, you can do that as well. So if you want to name like HC1, your kitchen zone, or whatever you want to call it, you can. That's where you will do that as well. Back to the main menu, and then factory defaults. That's just bringing you back to some factory default settings. Your information button, we'll get into that a little further down here. So normally when you would start up the boiler in HC, this is what you're going to see. So you would have to go to settings, adjust your temperature of units. So you would hit OK on settings. Once you get to settings, you scroll down to temperature units. Once that you hit OK on temperature of units, this will come up here. Now just check off Fahrenheit. You hit OK. You're all set, and now it will display in Fahrenheit. Same thing with time and date. If you want to go back to set your time and date, go back to settings, where the gears are there. Set your time and date, and it does it in 24-hour time clock on this boiler. So you need to know your 24-hour time clock, and then set your time and date. The reason why I always said it's important to set your time and date is this boiler does, you'll find fault codes with time and date. So I found a lot of issues with time and date, like generators added to systems that didn't upgrade the gas piping. I had another one where the voltage coming into the house, for some reason, every night at 7 o'clock, the voltage would drop down to about 70 to 60 volts in the house. So it was a little helpful tool to help me find things. As well as you're going to find that we have a lot of different time programs on this boiler as well. So hitting that menu button, then I'll hit the very top one, that's the heating one. When you hit OK on that heating, this sub menu comes up to the right there. Party mode, which is what I'm going to be doing in about an hour or two here. We're going to go down and hit my party mode on my button. Just playing. Party mode, what that means is if you're having company over your house, we can do a time program, and we can do reduced modes on this boiler. So this boiler acts like say a setback thermostat. You put a thermostat in somebody's house, they go in there, they program it, they want it to come on and off throughout the day, or go off when they go to work, come on when they come home for lunch, whatever it may be. The boiler can do the same exact thing. We do it a little differently than a thermostat. If you're doing constant circulation, the boiler's running, and all of a sudden, people are at your house, all of a sudden the heat's going to want to go down because you're going to go into a reduced mode at night. And then your domestic might be following that as well. So what the party mode does is you go down there, you click on the checkbox, hit OK on that checkbox. And what that does is it will continue regular operation for 8 hours. So it won't go down to that reduced temperature. And you kind of get a little better understanding as we go down here. The economy mode is the opposite of party mode. You're going to force it into the reduced mode. So you're leaving your house. I want to put it into my night setback. I just hit that economy mode. It will put it back into setback mode for 8 hours as well. If you are doing constant circulation like I do at my house, if I want to set my room temperature set point for this would be my thermostat for my radiant, I'd go down there and adjust my room temperature set point. So if I want 68 degrees in my living area, I go down to my boiler. I put 68 degrees in my room temperature set point. And you can do this on the main screen as well. I'll show you that coming up. But say you want to go into a reduced mode, or you want to go back down to the red room, as I always called it, red room, red room. What that stands for is a reduced room temperature set point. So during the regular operation, it's going to be your room temperature set point. Reduced temperature at night or before you go to work or whatever you have in your time program, that's where you're going to put that. So if you have this one here at 70 and you want it to drop down to 68 at night, you put 70 here and 68 here, and then it automatically will start to decrease. Don't shut the pump off. That's what I like about the reduced mode on constant circulation, is that the pump will stay running constantly, and we're just going to modulate to the outdoor temperature. Less chance of freeze up. I've had many freeze ups when customers left their house at 6 in the morning, and went from 72 degrees down to 65, and then got home to a frozen pipe because within all those hours of it cooling off, pipe freeze. So I kind of like this way here when we're doing circulation, and it will slowly graduate the temperature down until we maintain that temperature. As you can see, the next one down, operating time program, you follow those blue lines on with the HC circuits. It will be in either heating and domestic, both, or you can put it in domestic only, or you'll find with the startup wizard, you're going to see this standby button up there. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to click that. As you can see, next one down from the operating program is your heating time program. Heating time program is if you're doing constant circulation and you want to start to reduce your times or have them come on and off throughout the day, just like a night setback thermostat. You can do that 4 times a day, 7 days a week, just like a thermostat on your heating time programs. Holiday programs a little different than heating time programs. Holiday program here in the US is vacation program. So what that is, it's okay, I'm leaving on July 1st and coming back November 2nd. Nice vacation. You would put those dates and times in here and what temperatures you want to drop down to. So when you leave, it drops down automatically, or when you come back, it's already on running. That works great also in summer houses, winter houses. I did it in churches as well. So you can put time programs in there as well. I want it on and off, whatever. Next one down are heating curves. This is where if you went through the startup wizard and you had to go back there and readjust the heating curves, you would go hit that heating button again. So you push the 3 lines on the very bottom menu button, hit OK on the heating, hit that sub menu, go all the way down. There's your heating curves. Hit OK on that. Next screen you're going to see is slope and shift. This boiler does a slope and a shift. We'll go over that a little bit here as well. The nice thing with our boiler is you can actually see the physical temperatures changing with the temperature outside. So you can make sure, I always set my heating curves to the coldest day of the year on my high side and then modulate up and down that curve. Just be aware all our boilers are defaulted at 1.4. That means that boiler shipped at 1.4, meaning that in Germany, that is their max temperature. So prior to this, these boilers only went up to 167 degrees because that's law in Germany. If you figure about what the fuel bills there, fuel prices are coming down now, but they're triple the price there because they don't have any of their own natural resources there. So they usually pay triple the amount of the fuel. So you got to become very energy efficient. We haven't got to that point yet because our fuel is still very cheap. A parallel shift, you're doing the downside of your shift. So you're raising, lowering your temperatures at the bottom end of the scale. I always say if you're doing a shift, make sure you readjust your slope because it adjusts here, but it also raises and lowers your slope. So once you make a shift at the bottom, do your slope. A shift is, if you want, it's defaulted at 68 degrees. So if you had 68 degrees on your room temperature set point, that means 2 degrees above that is our warm weather shutdown. So if on your room temperature set point on what I was showing you earlier, if you set that to 68 degrees, that means your warm weather shutdown is going to be 70. That means if you have your pumps tied in here, they will shut off at once it hits 70 outside. Looking at the curves and our heating curve chart from the manual itself. Now you can see on the right-hand side, we have our boiler water temperature or our supply temperature. Our room temperature set points down here. Our outdoor temperatures over here. Just make sure when you're following these, you're following Celsius or Fahrenheit. And then our slope is over here. And this is how we're going to ride up and down that scale to get to different temperatures when it rises up and down the scale. So you can just see different temperatures at where you're at. So now you can see that 1.4, that's actually it's It's about 167. So on this scale here, it should be around 167. I'm not sure that it could be just readjusted here. So outdoor reset, and why use it? I always say, why not? With this boiler here, with your when you're doing heating curves, you can actually do a minimum and a maximum. So you can go to, I think it's C2 or C3 in the manual, and you can put a minimum. Okay, on my heating curves, I don't want to go below this temperature. Say you're doing hydrocoils. I don't want to drop below this heating curve. I don't want to go over this heating curve. So you can do a minimum and a maximum. So you maintain a curve within a set point type of deal. So I always say if you're doing hydro level and you want to maintain certain temperatures within, then you adjust your curves accordingly, and then do a minimum and maximum. It's the thing when you look at this manual, it can be pretty intimidating when you look at all the coding in the manual. The thing with this manual, though, is a lot of stuff that's in there that you might not even use. So a lot of those pages get taken out. So hopefully that will take a little fair at it when you're looking at the manual. And then the more classes you come, the more accustomed you'll come to the control itself. Things that we want to do, and my thing here is keep up, not catch up. Do a little more of constant circulation so we can get that temperature down, going back to the boiler so we can get these boilers to condense. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to run these boilers at lower temperatures to get them to condense. With our boilers, for each gallon of condensate that we grab before it's leaving the boiler, that's 8,000 BTUs that we're putting back into the boiler. So that's how you're getting your energy efficient. That's how you're getting these boilers to sweat and condense. And we want our boilers to rain, right? But we want to grab all that heat before it leaves the boiler. It's sort of like when you're looking at your car in the morning, it's cold outside, it starts to heat up and you start to get condensate out of your tailpipe, right? In our case, we want that condensate to keep coming and keep coming. So we want it to hit the cooler temperatures. So it makes the boilers more efficient. What we need to know about the building, what's in the emitters, who's in the building, what's the building construction of, and our design parameters as well. These all come into play in setting your heating curves and where you're going to set them. And a lot of times it all stems down to the comfort of the homeowner. Yeah, they want to save fuel, but downright nobody wants to be cold or nobody wants to be too hot, right? So it's all about being comfortable and saving some energy. So I'll do a reset and how does it work with our boilers? Just to show and make it a little easier for people to understand. This way help me understand it better. Because when I first started putting in boilers with heating curves 30 years ago, which not many did, you had to be like an engineer and understand it and have an engineering degree. Now, hopefully we can make it a little more easier to understand. And for this example today, we'll go over it and try to make it easier. So on the right hand, when you're looking at our chart in the manual, on the left-hand side is going to be your boiler water temperature. Again, Fahrenheit, Celsius, depending on what you're working with. And then down here is your outdoor temperature. And then your heating curves are on the right-hand side here. So for this example here, just so you can get an idea of how heating curves work, we're going to just pick a 1.0 heating curve. So for that day, and like I say, remember it depends on the emitters, who's living in the house, heat loss calculations as well. This could be like a medium temp type of house with a 1.0 here, depending on what you have for emitters, so medium type emitters. So I just, like I said, I designed it for the coldest day of the year. So -4 outside that day. We follow up on the chart here. So -4 at a 1.0, we come up to the chart, we follow that across. We're about 140 degree water temperature that day. Once it warms up to 23 degrees outside, up and down the scale, we're going to fluctuate. But say it's 23 degrees one day, we come up, follow that over to the red line. Once we hit that red line, we follow it over. That day we're heating 122 degree water temperature. And then so forth. As you get down to 50 degrees outside, now you can see. Most days with my radiant, I'm around here, 0.4. And then you can follow that over and see on different temperatures of what I'm heating my house with those days. Within this range here, we're anywhere between 70 degrees and 140 degrees. We're fluctuating up and down. Go back. One thing I want to say too is if you do have a 1.0 heating curve, and this is how it works in a nutshell here, is if it drops 1 degree outside, our boiler water temperature goes up 1 degree. As you go up the scale, exactly what it means. If you had a 2.0 heating curve, when it dropped 1 degree outside, our boiler temperature now goes up 2 degrees. Drops 2 degrees outside, our boiler water temperature will come up 4 degrees. That's how it works. To me, that was an aha moment. Just to show you without the lines in place, just so you can see it without the lines. Here now we have a 2.0, so remember, if it drops 1 degree outside, our boiler temperature goes up 2 degrees. Drops 2 degrees outside, 4 degrees on the boiler. So at -4 that day, on this boiler here, we can go up to the 190s. We're reading, really hitting that cold temperature day, the boiler's firing at full temperature. Once it starts to warm up outside a little bit, 23 degrees outside, we're now heating the house with 158 degrees. 50 degrees, 122, depending on how you want to go up and down that scale. So as you can see, we're still fluctuating, but we're going to shoot to these temperatures as you go higher up to the scale with a faster, steeper curve. So the temperature range with that 2.0 curve on those temperatures, anywhere from 70 degrees to 194 degrees. This chart is in our manual. We did add color to it. So these, I show out that these are starting points for your heating curves right here. So depending on what type of emitters you have on your boiler, I mean in your house or in your system. A would be your low temperatures, maybe radiant. B, medium type of temperature emitters, radiators. Sometimes radiators are down low temp as well because they can hold some temperature pretty well. One of the best emitters I think out there are the radiators. The Runtal radiators would be a medium temperature. And then when we get into high temp, it might be high output baseboard or fan coils. Oops, sorry. So as you can see on the side of the chart here, are A. So these are your starting points depending on where you want to maintain. And I always, like I said, always figured in a couple of calls to go back and adjust heating curves if needed for the homeowner's comfort. But if I couldn't get out there right away, I would just go and have them adjust the room temperature set point, and that will bump up. If you raise your room temperature set point, it will actually bump up your heating curve, so it'll give you more temperature until you can get out there. Oops, sorry. Trigger finger here today. B temperatures. So these would be your medium temperatures here. And like I said, these are starting points. And just kind of look at where you would want to put it. What temperatures you want to achieve or not go over. And remember, you can put a minimum. So I don't want to go below here. And I don't want to go above here. And I just want to fluctuate in between here. So there's a lot of different things you can do in coding as well. And then you can see C is our high temperature emitters, anywhere from 1.6 up to 2.6 on this scale. Okay, back to the menu. So we hit that 3 lines at the very bottom of that up, down, left, right control there. Once we do that, we hit the down arrow hit DHW. That's where you're going to be able to put set your DHW set point for your indirect storage tank. It ranges, I think, from 68 to 140 is the set point. You can go up to right from here. If you need hotter water temperatures, that's encoding. I think the max temperature for domestic is 160. Make sure you have some type of anti-scald coming out of that indirect. That's a good way to increase the size of your indirect or volume of your water. But just make sure there's some type of protection there. So that's where you would do your room temp, your domestic set point is here. Your next one down, if you want to do a DHW time program, if you want to just do your DHW time program, when you first hit OK on that there, it's going to come up and say automatic or individual. If you leave it on automatic, if you have any type of heat time program, it's going to follow that one. If you want to have an individual time program from your heating, or if you don't have a heating time program, you can do just the domestic and just do individual. And then you can do your individual time program for your domestic to come on and off throughout the day. As well as if you want to do a recirculation time program, so you want to you have recirculation throughout the house, so the homeowner opens up the faucet, the hot water comes out. You can do that time program as well, 4 times a day, 7 days a week as well. So that's why in the beginning we tell you that why is it important to set your time and date correctly. I keep pointing out all the different things why. Excuse me. Next one down there, test the boiler. If you got to the job, you wanted to see the boiler fire and all the pumps come on, you go there, hit the test mode, and the test mode will fire the boiler up to limit. A lot of people on our older boilers, we had the test mode that was a switch actually. Even on our commercial boilers, we have it today. That's required in Germany, by the way, so they can come and test your efficiency of the boiler. And they give you a certain amount of time to make sure that that boiler is fixed. So that's why these test buttons are here. It's all about efficiency there and making sure your boiler stays efficient. Boy, would I love to have some of that here in the US. I'm still working on some boilers that were put in the 1800s, and that's no lie. So that's where you would do your DHW recirculation test, and I'm sorry, recirculation time programs, your time program, or your domestic set points. If you want to test your boiler there, as well as if you want to see what's going on with your zone controls, that's where you would go there. To make that domestic setting, this is what it would look like. You would go to the menu button, hit the menu, comes up, scroll down to domestic. Then you're just going to hit your up and down arrow on your, not on the screen itself, but you're going to hit the up and down arrow on the left, right, up, down arrows on that control. If you want to do a domestic time program, when you get there, on this one here, you hit on program 1. That's just for the, it's going to do 1 program a day, 7 days a week. When you put that time in, you hit OK on here. This one's going to highlight, so you would then put whatever, your 500. Once you hit OK on that, the side comes highlighted, and then you're done. Your shutdown times are here, on and off here. If you don't do any other time programs, just make sure that these stay dashed lines. Don't put zeros in here. They must stay dashed lines. Information, this is a neat thing here. So if you want to take a quick look of all your actual temperatures going on with your boiler, your outdoor temperature, all the different things you can see here. When you push that general button there and hit OK on it, you can see your outdoor, your boiler temperatures, your burners, your burner on, the run hours. You can see a lot of these things are hooked in here that you can see, run hours of the boiler. Neat little helpful tools in my short cycling. You can take a look here. Go over the startup wizard here. So when you first initially buy this boiler and you install it, this is what it's going to do when you first initially start it up. So the first thing it's going to do is the initial power up. So this power line comes across and it's done checking. Next thing it's going to come up is your American English. You check OK on that and then hit OK. Once you hit OK on that one, You now come over to here, then set your time and date. Remember, that's in a 24-hour time clock. And then their date is a month, a day, I'm sorry, day, month, year. Once you hit OK on that, the next thing it's going to ask you is to set your either your Celsius or Fahrenheit. Make sure you click OK. And then the next one down, if you didn't tie in that number 5 domestic sensor, it wouldn't be here. So that wouldn't be so if you're not doing domestic and you didn't plug in that number 5, this wouldn't even come up and ask you, do you want to set your domestic set point? But in this demonstration here, the DHW sensor is connected, and so now it's going to ask you set your domestic set point. At this window here, your max is 140. Next thing is, do you want no zone circuits or do you want zone circuits? A no zone circuits is the older way of constant circulation. It keeps your pumps running 24/7, and then you're modulating to your outdoor temperatures as well as your low loss and your outlet sensors. If you did that, this is what the screen would look like here. And then now, as you can see, it would say HC1 up here on the screen. You would also have that house and what's going on inside the house, what's going on outside the house. So in this one here, in my house, let's say if I wanted to go above 70, I would just come over here, hit this up arrow here, and raise that up. Same thing if you adjust your heating curves and you're doing constant circulation and the homeowner says it's not warm enough or it's too hot, you can just have them go down here, hit your up or down arrow, and that'll readjust your heating curves as well until you can get out there and make the proper adjustments. As well as now you can see that there's an outdoor sensor connected because you can see the outdoor, so you can see what's going on outside the house. It's outdoor temperature. The newer way that most people are doing is zone circuits. So if you pick these down here, 1, 2, or 3 zone circuits, meaning that we're controlling your system pumps or we're using your end switches. Remember, you can tie 3 controls with end switches on this boiler and have 3 different temperatures, whether compensation or outdoor temp or fixed set point. So now you can see the symbol has changed. So now you know you're in your ZC functionality. By the way, a lot of guys still do constant circulation. Just 90% of people don't do it here in the States. I would say it's a small portion of people. But once you learn it and use it, it's actually really neat and it works really well. But here we like to use end switches and contact closure, meaning that's an end switch or something closing to call the boiler on. So for this example here, we're going to pick 2 zone circuits. And for the first zone circuit, as you can see at the top, it says zone circuit 1. We're going to just make this one here for an example of fixed set point. Once we hit OK on that fixed set point, it's going to say, OK, what fixed set point temperature do you want? Remember, this boiler can go from 165 to 190 and down. Once you hit OK on that, it's now going to ask you, OK, for that zone circuit 1, what pump or what circulator do you want to use? So you're going to pick either that 2820 pump or your 157 pump output. For this scenario here, we'll pick the 2820 pump output. Hit OK on that. Okay, so now we're already starting on a zone circuit 2. So we hit OK on that. For this example, we'll make this one here weather compensating, meaning we're going to modulate with a thermostat to the outdoor temperature, or with multiple, maybe you have your end switch tied to the zone circuit 2, and you want that whole zone control to modulate to the outdoor temperature, but zone circuit 1, you had put a fixed set point for maybe a hydrant coil, and that's the only way you want to run it. Zone circuit 2 are all the zones. This one here, we'll set our heating curve for all of those, make the adjustments on our slope and shift if needed. And now let's pick that pump output. So on the first one, we picked that 2820. So now you see it's already gone. So this one here, we'll pick that 157 pump output. Remember, that 157 is that powered one that I showed you in wiring. So those 2 that I showed you in wiring is now here. If you want to add more pumps to the boiler, it would start to display as you add them to that 145 communication, our AM1 pump module, which allows you to add more pumps to the boiler if needed, and then do all your control programming for those as well on the control. I pulled this from our Academy website, so these are some of the videos that we do. This is our Academy in Warwick. On the other side, our other side has three 300s installed.
Start by selecting your desired language. Next, set the time and date. The time is in a 24-hour format. The date is a month, day, year format. The next step is to select your temperature unit. For this example, we will select Fahrenheit. At the zone circuit settings screen, select the number of zone circuits you will be connecting to your boiler. For this example, we will be selecting 2 zone circuits. For zone circuit 1, we will select a fixed set point setting. Under the temperature set point screen, set your target temperature. Under the output configuration screen, select the desired pump output for the zone circuit. For zone circuit 2, we will select weather compensated functionality. Under the heating curve screen, make the necessary adjustments to the slope and shift to achieve the desired heating curve. Next, you can select the desired pump output for the zone circuit. The zone circuit settings screen summarizes your selections.
So now you can
Continue
see
with OK, and startup is now complete.
So they made the startup wizard here in engineers here in the US. They did an awesome job with that as well. So just let's go over some of the symbols and what they mean on the control itself. So now you can see up in the left-hand corner, we have that ZC functionality up there. We have a radiator in the screen right next to it. So that represents a radiator, meaning that we're in the heating mode. And then this right here, it means that the pump is running for heat. As you can see over here, there's no outdoor temperature, so that must mean that we have a fixed set point on that zone circuit 1. So remember in the setup, we adjusted it for a fixed set point. This is what you're going to see on that zone circuit 1. So over here is your selected temperature, and then burner percentage, 54%, as well as if you see this illuminated here, it means the burner is on, flame on. Next thing you see up in the top left-hand corner is zone circuit 2. So now you can see same thing, radiator, pump is on, but now look, we have an outdoor temperature. So now you know on that zone circuit 2, we're in that outdoor reset functionality. And it's gonna modulate with an outdoor temperature with a thermostat. So that's a cool thing. Why not use outdoor reset? It's gonna run with your thermostat. So now you can see it's a little different here. Your outdoor temperature, same functionality over here that we had on the prior. Now we've got different current operating temperatures. It might be warmer outside, so we only have to run the boiler up to this temperature. Let's go over accessing some menus. I find that the service menu, when you come to our troubleshooting classes, we offer troubleshooting classes on all our boilers as well, where we actually created fault boxes where you flip a switch and then you get a fault on the boiler. You have to figure it out and then replace the pot actually, whether it's a wet one or whatever you're changing it. Gas valve, fans, we do all of it. You might not ever have to do it, but at least you'll know how to do it. So to access that service menu here, once you press OK in the menu button at the bottom, so you'll see OK in the menu. You're going to press and hold these 2 buttons at the same time for about 5 seconds. And if you were at our webinar yesterday, I did the 200. Now you can see the similarities of the controls. They're pretty much the same exact control. So once we get into that service menu, it will say service at the top of the screen here. And then as you go, you want to open up the service function menu here. Once we open up that service function menu, these are the things that you can see here. So at the very top, our diagnosis. The next one down is our actuator test. You can test all your relays, and that's where you're going to test your relays and do all your testing, high and low fire, and that will come up in a few minutes here. As well as there's your fault history. It will give you the last top 10 faults. Starting with the number 1 being your newest, number 10 being your oldest, and as it comes in with a newer fault, the older one gets replaced with the newer one to number 1. Service functions and then terminate service just means you're going to get out of the screen. So service functions here, when you push that button again, you press OK on participant check. That's if you have multiple boilers. You can see who's checking in if you're tied into what boiler. Service pins, the Vitocom pins, codes, those things, you would go into the manual and take a look at what you're looking at there. Service resets, just resetting the service programs. And then maximum output, I talk about that slightly here. If you ever had a situation where you took over a job and it kept snuffing out, and when it went to high fire and you couldn't figure it out until you get out there, maybe it's a gas volume issue, regulator issue, you might come here for your maximum output for your heating. Decrease that till the boiler stays running till you can get out there to either repipe it or whatever. Next one down, multi-boiler setup. So you could do multiple boilers with this tied together, and they'll communicate together. They'll modulate up to maybe 40%, and then the next boiler will come on to 40%. So that's how they do multiple. So if you are doing multiples, you have to go here, hit OK on multiple, and then you'll find that you'll hit the check box, and then it will change the screen. But say we started the boiler, we went through the startup wizard, and we said, oh man, I messed that up, I want to switch that around. In that service function box, that's where you can reset the startup wizard and start right over from the beginning. Redo the startup wizard. So just like what Mo was just showing you in that video, if you want to start that right from the beginning, again, you go here from the reset that startup wizard, and then it will start right back with your language and your time and your date, and then your programming. So about that halfway point here with programming. So if you have questions, please ask.
All right. Looks like you are covering everything, Jay. There are no questions.
All right, I'm hoping Juan's staying awake for this, that's all. Just playing one. All righty, let's continue on. We're at the halfway point here and coming downhill. All right, to get into your coding levels, to access your coding level 2s, this is where you're going to do all your coding levels for your general, your boiler, and your domestic, if you have solar connected to the boiler. So you still have to go through that first process of hitting OK in the menu button, both at the same time for 5 seconds. Once you do that, then you're going to hit OK and then the return arrow for another 5 seconds. And you'll see this screen come up on the control. First one we're going to go to make some coding changes, and I'm going to discuss the first ones in general. And as you can see here, we have boiler, domestic, and solar. So any coding, when you were in the manual, if it says to make those changes in general, here is where you're going to go and make those changes in general. If it says in the manual, okay, we're in the boiler, we're going to go make some coding changes in boiler. That's where you're going to click OK on that, as far as domestic and solar. Once we do that, the first thing that's going to come up is that 00. And 00 is exactly what it means, a system type. So as I look at this here, I know just from working with these boilers, anytime I see an even number here, I know I have domestic tied in my boiler. So remember auto recognition. It'll recognize mixing valves, it will recognize our modules. This number will change here. So I know that I have one high temperature with one DHW. If you look in the book, it goes from 1 to 10. So if I had just a 1 up here, that means I would have just one high temp zone on here. So that's what it means by system types. So if you look in the manual, if you get a chance, you can go on that Pro Resources, look at any manual, and then scroll down to general coding in your coding book, and then just see all the different types of system type of that you can have. With mixing valves, it would change the number. 2 mixing valves would change the number. AM1 module or low loss header sensor would change the number. The one talking about low loss header sensor, say you plug that in because it did come with the boiler, but you don't need a low loss header with this boiler because you don't have to do primary, secondary with this boiler. If you did put that in, you could either change it here, or as well, you could go to address 52 in general. That's why I always say, take a look at your manual, what it has in it. And you can see all the different things there. But if you go to that address in general, it's always defaulted to a 0. If there's a 1 in there, that means you have your low loss header sensor tied to the boiler. You would hit OK. This highlights on this side. Change that 1 back to a 0. You're done. It'll have all the defaults in the manual as well. That means what it's shipped to with and what number should be in there as well. Down here, I always like to point this one out because this was a thing when you're changing from natural gas to propane. There's actually a code to get into address 82 where it tells you to make that change from natural gas to propane. So here it's password protected, but the call I used to get was, hey, I put the 9 password in here, but it turned back to a 0. It's gonna turn back to a 0. But when you change that to a 9 here, hit OK, look up here, a key should come up here. If a key comes up here, that means you unlock the door. That means now you can go over to this address and turn that 0 to a 1. And now your propane change has been changed. Altitude for you people out there in Colorado, that's a coding card change, as well as you can make some coding changes here. So there are codes for high altitudes, usually above 5,000 feet. And what we found in some applications, you didn't really need that coding card. The boiler worked fine. So it could be a trial and error sometimes with these things. Remember, low NOx coding cards do not work with propane. So you people out on the West Coast side, if you're doing low NOx and you're putting the low NOx coding card in there, it won't work with propane. Just a little helpful tool. I discovered that in my class when I found a coding card and put it in our boiler, and it was for low NOx. And then when we turned up the code for that number 11 to propane, we got a fault. And it tells you to change the coding card. But all you have to do is change it from propane back to natural gas. That fault will go away. But if you are doing propane, you have to put the right card in there, and can't be on propane. So if you want to make changes to pump output, say that 2820 pump output, you don't want to use it for a system pump, you want to use it for a recirculation pump, or you want to make it your domestic pump, or you want to make it a heat pump, you go into coding, address 53 there, and then change that 53 to the coinciding number that you want to put it. Same with address 157 if you want to make it a feed pump, a circulation, or an alarm output, you could do that as well. Same thing with address 39 on the 21 pump output, you can make it a recirculation, a heating pump, or a DHW by hitting OK when you're at that address in general, highlight this side, and then put whatever number that you want that pump to do. Prior to the startup wizard, you had to go in there and program all those DE contacts. Tell the pump what you wanted it to do, what temperature do I want to achieve, and what I'm doing with that contact closure. So that got taken away with the startup wizard. So each time you wanted to use an end switch or a thermostat going to our boiler, you had to go in and program each one to do its thing. As well, adjusting your 9B which was only adjustable for all three of them. So now you can have 3 different set points for your boiler. Where prior to this, you only had one fixed set point, and if you wanted to adjust that from the 70-degree Celsius that it came in to 167, that was your max temperature. So on the prior models, we had to be a little creative on their boilers. The other reason why you might want to set your time and date on the boiler is here. We can do service intervals here, meaning that a wrench will come up on the screen to let the homeowner know that it's time for the annual maintenance. You can do that in hours, you can do that in months, and you can have the wrench display or not display. You can also adjust your maximum boiler temperature on that 06, as well as if you come to our troubleshooting class, I always explain that. As you can see now, we're encoding in boiler. I forgot to say that, my fault. Prior, when we were in general, now we went back, we hit OK on boiler coding. And these adjustments are in boiler, by the way. Apologize for that. Over here, this address 38, when you come to a troubleshooting class, if you look at your last page of your fault codes with these boilers, you can find there's some faults that come on more so on the 200 than the 300, but with this boiler here, you have a low water cutoff on this boiler. And if you didn't have one that had lights on it, most of them do nowadays, so you can see that it's activated. You can come here, and if there's anything but a 0 in there, those last faults on that page will tell you what the problem is. So if you had your low water cutoff was activated, you came here and seen a 29, your low water cutoff is activated. The other thing, if you're doing primary, secondary with this boiler, you need to let the control know that you're either on the primary side or the secondary side, because that pump will shut down if you're on the primary side and let your domestic pump take over. Not so much with this boiler, more so on the 200. Here's where you would change your maximum boiler temperature for your indirect, and then it will give you temperatures in there as well. Run time durations after post-purge run times, recirculation times. The other neat thing with this boiler here is we have what they call outdoor frost protection. So as you can see, once the temperature hits 34 degrees outside, it becomes activated. And you'll see that in your screen. So sometimes you might get a homeowner calling you saying, hey, I've seen a little, looks like a snowflake right next to my sun. That's sun, that's a snowflake. If you see that, what that means is your outdoor temperature is below 34 degrees outside. So what it does is it protects the boiler and maintains 68 degrees on the boiler at all times, even without a call from a thermostat. For protection of the boiler, and to make sure that if your system pumps went down, your boiler is still gonna stay heated and not gonna freeze. So that's boiler protection with that outdoor reset. Once we get to 37 degrees outside, we now will shut down that frost protection and continue on. You can adjust the temperatures on that as well, when you want it to activate or when you want it to come on and off on that A3 address, encoding level 2. I believe that's in general as well. So this is showing that VitoConnect that is supplied with the boiler here. This is for the homeowner to use if they want to share their email device with, they had a spare email. They could share that device with you if they would allow you to use their email address. So they might be able to set up a third-party email address so you can see what's going on with the boiler. Or you can mess with them and shut off their hot water. Just playing, just playing. So we went over the programming of the boiler, the functions of the screens, the buttons, the displays of the buttons, what they mean. I went over several different ways and whys of current dates and times. Remember your time programs, domestic wise, heat time programs. Your fault codes come with time and date on it, and it can be valuable tools. Remember fixed set point or outdoor reset, utilizing that startup wizard for, and to me, we should starting to use those outdoor resets as much as possible. I know some people, like when I go to California, some of them don't like using that because, hey, it's warm outside, right? Or they're in a house with a $40,000 drop rug and they don't want to overheat it. So I can understand things like that. And lastly, we went over the heating curves, how they work. Remember, you know, whatever you're setting that to, you have a 2.0 heating curve. If it drops 1 degree outside, our boiler temperature comes up 2 degrees. So each time it drops, it goes up. So at this point, hopefully you came and learned something today and I didn't bore you to death. And now I can take my hair out of the ponytail that I now have because I can't get to a barber shop. And I don't want to cut my hair because the last time I did that, it was a disaster.
All right. Give everyone a second to see if there's any questions that come through. Well, it looks like no one has any questions as of right now.
All right. Well, if you do remember them, guys, remember Miranda's going to, right after this slide here, you'll see there's Miranda's email address. If you have any more questions and you want to send them in, please do. I appreciate you spending the last couple of hours with us. Hopefully you learned a couple of things from us here. And looking forward to our future webinars that are coming up that Miranda's posting. We've got some really neat ones coming up, and they're actually being done by others as well. So I'm getting a little hand here to see some different ways of looking at stuff. So we're going to have some exciting stuff coming up. So remember that Viessmann Academy website.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jay. As he stated, send me questions to that email if you have anything. The website will be updated tomorrow with those webinar opportunities Jay spoke about as well. And then again, just a reminder, in 2 weeks or so, this version will be posted on the video library. With that being said, that does conclude our webinar today. Thank you for attending and have a wonderful day.